Global migration is a pervasive reality. We have more migrants than ever in history. We even have more migrants as a percentage of the world population, just creeping up to about 3+% of the world population are people who live outside of their country of origin. They're expats, economic migrants, whatever you want to call them. And that's 3% of a much larger world population than was the case in 1950, right?
The lens through which your brain sees the world shapes your reality. If you can change the lens, not only can you change the way your brain perceives behaviors, but you can change the way people relate to cultural differences. Embedded within that statement is the key to benefiting from diversity.
But what is culture? It's a fuzzy concept. It is, it's like water to fish. We have difficulty defining it, especially defining our own culture, because it's all we know. There are dozens of definitions has been offered by social scientists regarding defining culture.
The main difference between individualistic and collectivist culture can be summed up in one question. What is the basic unit of society, the individual or the group? Taking a look at the two side by side, we find that in individualistic culture, the social unit is the individual, while in collectivistic culture, the social unit is the group. In
In the context of education, the term equity has come to mean the need to focus more directly, not simply on equal opportunity, that is making sure that kids have access to schools and the opportunity theoretically to learn, but really focusing on outcomes and results. And the analogy I often make is most parents practice equity with their kids. That is, we don't treat all kids the same because they have different needs. And when in schools that are really focused on equity, they're trying to meet the different needs of kids and do so in ways with a focus on outcomes.
Well, multicultural education, I think it's important to understand that it didn't just kind of rise up one day, but it really came out of the black struggle of the 60s and 70s. So that my own work, for example, I started in black studies, trying to help teachers deal with black studies with a little book called Teaching the Black Experience that was published in 1969. So then you began to get other groups, such as women, people with disabilities, saying we want to be also included. And then as the movement grew, it went from black studies to focusing really on ethnic groups in education, and then to multicultural education, which was the most inclusive term.
It's called a fleet.
To understand diversity, students only need to look as far as the next desk.
Okay, so what number goes over here?
37.
37.
It's been 4 years since the Eden Prairie District found itself in a fierce community fight after redrawing school boundaries. With an increasing Somali population, the district wanted to close racial disparities, especially evident in its elementary schools.
I think time certainly does heal some things.
Assistant Superintendent Josh Swanson says today the district has 33% students of color, with 70 languages spoken. He reports overall students perform at higher levels since the boundary change, even outperforming state testing standards.
And we also brought in an aspect of ethnic studies and African-American history that's typically left out of the traditional curriculum. So James joined our group, and we're doing an activity around African history, and James began to take over the activity. And it turns out that James had this wealth of knowledge about African history. So I talked to him afterward, and I said, James, how'd you learn all this stuff? And he said to me, well, Mr. L, I like to read a lot. And I like to study things about African history. So I said to him, well, James, all right, obviously you're really intelligent and you're doing all these things outside of school. Why are you having so much difficulty in school? This honestly should be pretty easy for you. And I'll never forget, he looked right at me and he said, this is just not for me.
Last year, after Ferguson happened, a lot of us were like, we need to talk about this. How do we talk about this in a way that's now reactive as opposed to proactive? How do we do that in a way that's not tokenizing? How do we do that in a way that feels safe for everyone? And I think ultimately, after thinking that through, we kind of felt we can't not talk about it. We know that's the wrong choice, so let's try and let's stumble and let's have really restorative conversations with our kiddos when things get tricky. So we came up with just kind of this shared understanding of what a protest is and why someone would engage in a protest. What's the purpose behind that? And it's a very beautiful thing to see a 7-year-old be able to say, well, it's because they're saying Black people are important too, not just white people. That's why I like teaching early education, because I think I have a really critical role that I can help develop at a young age that will hopefully carry through their life.